scientific resources. And the easiest way for getting them, you can use the ProQuest and EBSCO databases from our library, but they're pretty limited on things, is to go to PubMed Medline. They're getting more and more on there all the time. And so what I would do is, if you go to Google, the easiest way to get to this website, you put in PubMed Medline in there, and it's going to take you to the journal search here. So if you've been in my class before for the Biology 118, this was what you had to do, where you did the search of the journals on there. It has changed a little bit in there. And so you can put in your topic on here that you're going to want to use. And so let's say you wanted to do, so we'll do with whooping cough and pertussis. You could start with a broad topic in there. And what's going to come up by default is everything, but what you want are the ones that are just the free full text. And it used to be a thing over here on the screen. Now they have moved it over here. And you want the free full text available. Full text available, it means it's available, but you're going to have to pay for it. And if you've got access to somebody else's database where you work, and you can pull them up for free, great. But I don't expect you, and you wouldn't need to actually buy articles to be able to do this. If you were working on like a PhD thing or a master's thesis, then it's a little bit different ball game, but you would also be at a school that would have a much better database than we have here. So you'll click on the free full text available, and it narrows it down quite a bit, but most of what you're going to find in this is going to tend to be newer too, since the rules have changed about what has to be open to the public on here. So with a public health paper, what you're looking at is, how is this a concern to the general public? It's not, with a real basic paper, you talk about the disease, how does a person get it, all of those kinds of things. That's covered in our PowerPoints in here for this class. So what you're looking at is taking kind of how do you prevent the disease, or how do you treat the disease, and taking that little section of the disease process and going into a lot more details on it. So when you're going through looking in this, pertussis is a good one to use as an example right now. This is the whooping cough, where you're hearing about how there is outbreaks of it. And one of the reasons for the outbreaks is there was large populations that were not vaccinated for this when there was some concerns about the vaccine. And anytime stuff gets out there, vaccines are one of those topics that tends to be, you'll have populations that are like, no, 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 all vaccines are evil. And then other people are, yeah, everybody get all of your vaccines in there. And the two parties don't look at it and say there's any moderation in the middle. And you've got this largely unvaccinated population now that has allowed this disease to get reestablished out there. So you can look through on these articles here for things like that. Some of these will say EPUB ahead of print on here. I like to, when I take an article and I'm going to print it out, is I will copy and paste this information onto another Word document, so that I've got all of this stuff where I got it from, so that if I need to go look it up again, I can go back and reference it and find it a lot easier. Because you could type in this and search it here and pull it up. A lot of times you can even type in the name on Google and it will bring you back to this website. So it's just a way of kind of, if you lose your information, of going back to get it again easily in there. So you would pick the articles that you want on here, and the ones that are e-published ahead of time sometimes are not fully up here like that. And typically your better articles are going to be a little bit longer in there. So if you're looking at things that are public health in there, how can we prevent this kind of stuff? This one here, this updated recommendations. Morbidity and Mortality Weekly is a good source to use in there. Would be something that you would want to have. See if I can find one that I think is going to be a better example in here. A good journal. So this one, they've actually done the study on here, looking at things in Ethiopia, but wherever you were doing your topic on. And it's from a public health journal in there. That means it's going to be more likely to be what you need. So when you go in and get the article, what's going to come up usually right away is the abstract. And you want to be able to get the free full text. You usually just have to scroll down on there.
So you want us to actually basically look for the public text article?
You want to get the full text.
Public health.
Yeah. So why am I... Maybe it's going to be in this link here. So this will give you the full article here. I'll show you where to find stuff for the bibliography, but one of the mistakes people make when they use electronic sources here is they cite them as websites instead of as electronic journals. You want to cite them as an electronic journal in there because they are, first and foremost, they're a journal. It's just libraries used to have massive amounts of space to store all of these journals. And they're almost all in electronic sources now. It just makes them more easily available in there. So your abstract to be at the beginning, but you want to include the name of the journal in there, because if you don't include that, it looks like it's just a website. And for scientific papers, websites are not going to be very reliable. You may get a little bit of your background information from a government website, something like the CDC. But otherwise, with a scientific paper, unless it's CDC or like Morbidity and Mortality Weekly online, I would not even bother using websites because they're just considered to be an inferior source and less reliable in there. In the scientific community, it's all of these journals in here because this is the actual researchers who did the study publishing the material. So it can be kind of tempting to go, okay, I'm just going to use the abstract in here. And sometimes you do have to go follow a few different links to get to the full file on here. It says it's supposed to be available as a PDF. Or in production. Did I go too early on this? Okay, 17 pages, yeah, that's what we want. So this is actually all of the authors in here that you're seeing with that. Is that big enough that you guys can see it on the screen? Okay. So the abstract. And then we get into the full article here. So you start out with some background information. This is kind of an example of what you're looking for background information when you write this paper. Just about any scientific paper you write, they're going to expect you to focus on just these a little bit of background on what you're writing on, but it's usually you're taking that fine point of it and elaborating on it in your paper. So what your background, if you were writing on pertussis, maybe a paragraph on what pertussis is, how it is spread, what kind of symptoms it causes. It's just a small part of your paper. The rest of it is all on the public health aspect of it in there. So one of the things you'll notice in these is they use these little brackets in here to cite things. This is, in my opinion, it's the easiest way to do it. It's not the only way that is correct to do it, but let's keep it easy when we can. When you take an idea from another paper in there, you need to document where that idea comes from. And a lot of times people will look at it and go, well, it looks like all I'm doing is collecting other people's ideas. Yeah, pretty much you are. If you were actually doing the research, those other ideas are kind of what led you to do the research and agree with your research, or maybe you're discussing things that disagree with your research. When you're going through and doing a literature review in there, what you're doing is collecting all of this data from different people in there. So you want to say, this expert is why I think this. This expert here also helps to support my idea in there. So having a lot of sources cited in your paper is actually a good thing in there. They would look at it and say, well, you know, in your opinion, it's a scientific paper. These are people that are looking for the facts. They don't care what your opinion is. They don't even want to know your opinion for the most part in there. So when you take an idea from somebody's paper, you put that idea in here, and it needs to be in your own words. If you use a direct quote, you have to put quotation marks around it. If you just do this and it's a direct quote, it's considered plagiarism. If you put in somebody's idea and you don't put in where it came from, it's plagiarism. And in scientific papers, plagiarism is wrong and can ruin your academic career. But that would be like one of those things that if you were to do that on your master's, you're done. You still keep your student loan debt, but you're done. No master's degree for you. No other school is going to want you. No scientific place is going to want you in there. So in scientific papers, it is real serious business in there. You start looking at copyright infringements and things like that, where other companies have done these research, you're really opening an ugly door for yourself in there. So you want to be in the habit from the get-go of, if you take an idea like this, you reword it into your own words on there. One of the things that I've seen a lot of people do is they'll go, okay, I like this sentence, I'm going to cut and paste it in. I like this sentence, I'm going to cut and paste it in. That's plagiarism in there. So you could actually be kicked out of school, no nursing program for you, ever, kind of thing for doing that. So really avoid it in there. So what they've done is, as each source they have referred to, the first one they cite in there, they call number one. And when they have their bibliography at the end, number one is that source. So it's not alphabetical like you do in some things. It's in number order. You can make it alphabetical and number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then these numbers are all in a whole different order. But it's a lot easier to write your paper, and as you put the information in, put the number one on the source that you use, and create your bibliography in that order at the end, rather than making the bibliography first. Because as soon as you look and you go, oh, you know what, I need one more source to add in here at the end, you're throwing off your order, your numbers are all off. It's a lot harder to fix it than if you just do the number ordering. So as you'll see in here, you know, these, in their introduction, it's a collection of ideas from other people in there.
So when we're citing, are we citing from this writer, or let's say we use the first sentence in the second paragraph, they have it cited as number 2. Do we need to cite it as number 2? Or
you're citing it from this writer.
Okay.
In there. If you go back and use their sources, so one of the things when people look for sources that you can do is if you go, you know what, there's, let's see if we can find something on here that, so the methods, you're not going to have that in theirs because you're not actually conducting a study. And with data tables like this isn't the kind of thing that you can typically reword. Use it as a direct quote. So kind of to protect yourself in there, you know, you can also mention this table is taken directly as this, because it's kind of, quotation marks don't go around the table. But you can, you know, specify this table is taken directly from this place here. because numbers are numbers. You can't reword those. So say you looked and you went, all right, this idea that the study that maybe they used here at number 29, that seems like it's really interesting. I want to know more information about that point in there. I'd like to be able to elaborate on that more. When you go back through here, if you look and go, okay, number 29, I'd like to get that information. You can look and see where they got it, and it's okay to go and get some of the journals they used in there. So you may look and, you know, there's one paper in there that seems to just be really helpful for your topic, but you want more disease or more background on there. You may take 5 or 6 of their sources for writing your paper in here. In the one in this class, you've got 10 sources that you need to use, and that sounds like a lot, but when you're writing a scientific paper, it's really not very many, because sometimes all you're getting is one sentence idea from one source in there. So after you would collect, say, 3 different ideas from 3 different sources into one paragraph on something, that's where at the end you put your commentary on there and kind of how that information correlates. And you can say, well, this person says this and this person says this. They disagree on here. More studies may need to be done on that, or, you know, discuss what the faults were with one of them on why your paper supports the idea of the other one. It may be, well, 2 of the 3 feel this way in there. So that's where you kind of look and you correlate the facts is kind of at the end of the paragraph on there. And then again, correlate them and discuss them at the bottom of the paper in there. What you want to do when you're writing the paper, let me get a Word document open in here. Key points, scientific journals is the majority of your information. That'll get you to it, to get to the PubMed deadline. Text articles. So another thing is you may use sources, their bibliography. So you can't just go through and say, well, you know what, I'm going to throw in their sources in there. You need to actually pull up the paper and cite it. So that's a good way, though, to find additional sources in there. So another thing that you can do sometimes when you're looking at this, it will give other similar articles in there that you can find, and so that are similar to that topic in there, that you can go and find more of those. So when you're searching for things for this class, try searching the disease and public health with it. You can search cost, kind of financial impacts, or things to do your epidemiology. Those are kind of some key terms that will help get you narrowed down if you find too many articles on there. So is it pretty clear on how to find articles using that and kind of what to look for in there? What big pieces of information you want to take? Do you want me to go over more on that? So pretty comfortable on how you would do that. You guys have all used the EBSCO and ProQuest in there, so they've got passwords for it in the library at the brochure in the front desk. You want to make sure when you use those you check scholarly journals. Just about anything that would be in ProQuest or EBSCO is going to be in here. I would probably just start right here. Maybe search ProQuest or EBSCO if you have to, or if you work at a healthcare facility that's got accesses to some other healthcare specific databases. But ProQuest and EBSCO are not the best for scientific papers. They're more of an overall general one. So the other thing you're going to need to do is a bibliographic citation. And so on Clover Park's website, in the libraries portion, got the library catalog, the databases, and then your research information in there. You want your APA guidelines in there. So these are a couple of example sites on there. So let's see, I'll put this link on the Word document. Hopefully the typos are not too bad on here. I can't see what I'm putting on the screen. So there's a few different ones on here, but let's see, let's go with this one on here. So books, you aren't going to be using any books on here. So for your journals on here, print journals, you're probably not going to be using those either. I don't think our library has any. The UW, if you go up to the health sciences, they may still have some old ones, but I think most likely they've switched to all electronic sources. I don't know if the Tacoma branch has access to the databases in the health sciences library up in Seattle. You can most likely get everything you need without having to go up there. If you do go, bring a thumb drive, because I know even back when I went to the UW in the 90s, it was 10 cents a page to print like back in '93. So I'm sure that it's 50 cents a page or something now. They tend to take whatever it costs for any place else and does it more. So this DOI number, you may or may not have that on there, but this gives you an example format for the journals on there. And so the key thing is the journal title on there. And maybe it will let me copy and paste that in there for you guys. So you won't be using any magazines, you'll be using journals, but that gets the majority of it into that Word document for you. So you want to So key things, you want to make sure you cite any idea you take, even if it is in your own words. Make sure to use direct quotes if it is a quote in there. If you don't, it's plagiarism in there. One of the things with scientific papers, when you read them, you'll notice that they're like really dry and boring. They get straight to the facts. In English, they talk about, creating this vivid imagery and everything like that, and the creativity in expressing yourself. If that's something that you don't really like to do, and you feel like, I don't want to share all this stuff with you in an English class, that's the nice thing about a scientific paper. You have to have absolutely zero personality to write one. You share absolutely zero about your personality when you write one in there. So you tend to use passive voice is the language. So kind of things like the article stated, it was found, types of things like that. So where in English they talk about using more of your active language, you don't want to use the was, were in there, the kind of the weak verbs like that. In a scientific paper, you thrive on those. Those are your thing. You maybe try and, avoid starting every sentence with the same thing, but in terms of making it entertaining sounding, don't worry about it. If you look and you go, my paper is the most boring thing on the planet, you've pretty much achieved what you need to for a scientific paper in there. I mean, remember, these are people that are scientists that, I looked at this and I thought half of my teachers, and it's probably going to be bad karma that comes back to me for this, but, I thought half of them lived in dark basements and never saw any daylight. Were absolute geeks. So if you're looking at that writing going, it's that boring in there, that is what you are aiming to achieve. So you want to avoid the use of I or we unless you actually performed the study. So then you can say we found, we concluded. Otherwise you can say it was concluded or something like that. You try and stick with that passive voice as much as possible in there. No, I feel in there. Those are phrases that are not I like, I love. Nope. Avoid all that stuff in the scientific paper in there. So, it's kind of like Do you say this many kittens died and they were run over by a car? We don't say, isn't it tragic or anything like that. Kittens were dead. We don't care. Dead is dead on there. Kind of how you go with the scientific paper in there. Public health stuff. What you're looking at is kind of, the key with that is the cost and benefit to society as a whole versus an individual. So where it may be better to do something, it may be better for that one specific individual. That's not what your focus is. Saves the most lives, costs the least to society, prevents the most overall rather than saving one person. So if you were to look at it and maybe there was some sort of like outbreak in a population and they quarantined it, the quarantine isn't necessarily best for every individual in there. Because if you're in this population of potentially exposed and you weren't exposed, but some people in there were, you're going to get exposed. That's worse for you as the unexposed individual. But what's better for the population as a whole is to not take any chances and keep you locked up and prevent that thing in there. So sometimes what is best for the individual is going to be somewhat contradictory in there. Generally with public health, when they make policies, they're trying to look at how can we be what's best for society and not harm an individual in there. But you're not necessarily going to go out of your way to save a particular individual. So for that one particular individual in there that you don't know you're the unexposed person, yeah, it would be better to take you and isolate you somewhere else. That's what would be better for you, but it's not going to be what's better for the population overall, and it's not realistic and practical to take and isolate every single person by themselves. It's just not doable in those types of situations. So does that kind of clarify what is meant when we look at a public health aspect of things? Does anybody have any specific questions on their topic? On there, kind of some ideas on where to go with it, or is there any other questions you'd like me to address in here to help you with your paper?
Does it matter how many pages as long as you cover all the information?
Yes, is what it takes in there. I mean, if you submit 2 paragraphs, that's obviously not enough. But to say that, oh, there's a minimum of 5 pages or something like that, it's what it takes to cover it in there. I would say if it's less than 2 pages, you probably have not gotten enough. But, you know, if you're, sometimes 2 pages is, depending on the topic, is pretty complete, where others it takes more than that. When you submit it to me, the easiest thing is to submit it as a Word document in there. Send it single space. It's a lot easier for me to go in because I will make notes in it in the Word document itself in there, and it's just easier with the way things are set up, and a lot of them I end up grading on the iPad to have them be single spaced in there. To do that, I can enlarge the whole document more with the single space than I can with it every other line. And so what I tend to do is make notes in there in red in the Word document and save it in there. If you don't have Microsoft Word, go ahead and just paste it into the body of the email. It's going to mess up your alignment of the bibliography, but I don't so much care about that. I'm more concerned that you actually documented the stuff than, you know, that it's indented so many lines and everything like that. If you go to publish a paper at some point, APA is kind of the standard one used at this school by most of the instructors, so that's the reason I say use APA in here, is just to have it be consistent among what a lot of the colleges do. But if you use a particular publication that you're submitting the paper to at some point in the future, or a different paper you would write, they're going to have their own format they want the bibliography in there, and their own format on stuff like that. So the APA is a guideline. I don't go through and look and go, you put 3 spaces here instead of 2. What I'm looking at is, does it have the authors, the journal name? Can I find it from there? And the big thing people leave out is the journal name, because they cite it as a website. And so if you don't put the journal name in there, I can't tell what it is. And so as far as I'm concerned, it isn't a journal if I can't see that in there. But at least if it comes as a Word document or as in the body of an email, I can get in there and edit it with a different color so that I can give you feedback on it. Is there any other questions on that?